The castle. I feel blindsided. My wife, 29, and I, 30, have been married for 7 years. We've known each other for 16. The first 9 years we were best friends, never dated, connected about everything. Talked to each other, joked and laughed about our other relationships. At 21 and 22 we started dating after she confided in me what she had always had a crush on me. Was a bit of a surprise to me, but welcome, obviously. We dated for 3 years in college together and got married the month we graduated. 3 years later we had our first daughter. What a joy. Best thing that has happened in my life. 2.5 years later we were pregnant again. Early in the pregnancy there were problems. We were told at the 13-week ultrasound that the baby would not make it, less than 1% chance, and if it did that it would have severe problems. We both let go emotionally and waited for the baby to self-terminate. She didn't. She was a miracle, born with a congenital heart defect. She spent 4 months in the hospital and underwent 8 surgery to correct the pluming in her heart. I never knew I could love someone more than my first daughter. Our second is the happiest kid, never stopped smiling. She takes a lot out of us. She is 1 right now, but developmentally, motor skills, is still like a 7-month-old. Other than that, she is right on track. Mentally scoring really high and no problems at all. The last 9 months my wife and I have been living like single parents. I am too busy. I realize that now. I feel like I'm a super dad, working extended hours to provide for the family and let my wife stay at home with our daughters. We never see each other. I looked at this as a difficult time we'll get through. I've always thought that's how she felt too. 8 weeks ago, I thought it was odd that my wife went to a football game with a mutual friend of ours from high school. He doesn't even follow the team. They went with a group. I was busy, work of course, so he took my seat. I jokingly said, "Hey, now you and John get that date he's always wanted." In high school he was obsessed with my wife. She was never interested. She took it the wrong way. The wrong way. Blew up. Well, a week later it came up again and long story short I told her I didn't think it was appropriate for a married woman to be alone with a single guy. She convinced me that I was wrong. I'm controlling. I can't complete her and she needs friends to make her whole. I listened and said okay. Sunday I was giving our oldest daughter a bath and heard my wife's phone ping for a text message. It's looked down but it flashed John X. I made a mental note and thought, let me look at the phone records and see how often he's texting her. Yesterday I remembered that thought and did. I spent 2 hours digging through the last 5 months of phone calls and messages. My wife has averaged texting John 221 times a day, over 95% of her total texting. She has talked to him on the phone an average of 26.7 minutes a day since early August. Most of these conversations happen when she is driving to and from school, the texts all day, sometimes at 2 a.m., always at 8 a.m. I'm confused. How can this much communication be going on between her and someone else without me knowing it? How can that not be deceptive? Sure, I'm busy. We both are. I confronted her about it yesterday. Wrong time. Our kids were in the back of the van. First question, who would you say you text the most right now? My mom and John. How much would you say you talk to John? 2 to 3 times a day. All sounding like this is no big deal. Does that strike you as odd? No, he's my friend. I need you to be 100% honest with me. Can you swear on our daughters' lives that nothing is going on between you two physically? Yes, nothing. Emotionally? Yes, I need help. I'm devastated. We talked a long time last night and she admitted that he is filling an emotional void she has with me. It started while she was in the hospital, 100 days straight with our second. Amazing mother but whatever, through Facebook chat. She said he was someone to talk to, and she feels like I'm closed off and she can't talk to me. I asked her why she feels she can't open up to me. I've never felt like she can connect to me or express her emotions. She doesn't know. She can't answer that. I knew this was a problem for her and I've often tried to work on it. I always figured she just couldn't open up to anyone. Now I know there was someone she was opening up to. I'm still convinced nothing physical has happened. But this is just as bad. Worse. How do I fix this? I don't think I can. She needs to, right? We are going to our first marriage counseling session in a couple hours. I was going to ask if this was appropriate or not. DW even mentioned last night, and herself sobbing over how she understands this will cost her a friend. He really likes you. We should all just hang out together more. I find myself angry at this guy. Maybe I'm making excuses for my wife, but she was in emotion distress over our daughter and he swooped in. What guy does that without realizing it? She's convinced it's innocent and talks about him like there is absolutely no attraction, just someone to talk to. I don't believe her looking at the facts. Writing is on the wall. But in 16 years I've learned to read her pretty well and it appears to me she isn't lying at the no physical contact. I am level-headed enough to realize that some things just aren't meant to be. I understand that it takes two. And if I'm willing and she is not, there is nothing I can do. We're better off apart. What ruined me inside is our daughters. They deserve better. Please feel free to slap me and wake me up to reality if I'm not showing that I have a grasp of it. Marriage counseling. A lot of healing was started in the session yesterday. Almost all of what was brought up is already on the surface. She was just trying to understand us. A huge eye-opening thing for me was the following points. DW and I both agree that our marriage has lacked love for at least 3 years. For her, she's felt this and agonized over it internally without expressing it to me. She has expected me to see that and fix it. For me, I think in a coping way I redefined love in marriage to not include emotion. More on that below. And I've been moving along oblivious thinking we've got a perfect family because I adore my children and do everything I can to help my wife. DW is closed off emotionally. I was put in a difficult spot in this marriage because I have always tried to be there for her emotionally. But a resentment she has for her father makes her close off to me. Whenever we've gotten close in the past, much earlier in our marriage, she put up walls and pushed me back out. When I married DW, I felt early on like I was married to her and her mother. A lot of our early fights, verbal only of course, revolved around my asking, why can't you open up to me? Why can't you cry to me about your problems? And her declaring, you can't complete me. I need to be connected to others to be fulfilled as a person. My mom understands me more than you. I adapted and allowed her to get that connection from her mom that she probably needed to be forced into getting from me. I did what I do best, made the best of what I have, focused my energy on our children. Truth is, I gave up on this marriage long ago too. We both want to work on it. We both are. Update about emotional affair. It definitely is, and DW admits to it. Crying to me last night, I told her I forgive her and we need to move forward from this. Try, at least. The guy loves her. She loves that he listens to her. That is my honest assessment of the situation right now. DW's mother and I talked last night. One thing that is unique is that I grew up knowing DW and her mother is like a second mom to me. Her mother confided in me last night that DW has distanced herself from her these last 6 months. The last time she distanced herself from her mother was when she got into the relationship before the one with me. That guy her, allowed his friend to join in, got her into trouble with the law. I was the knight in shining armor that saved her from that. That is the foundation of our marriage, not love. It is liberating to say that, but also saddens me. Can this work? My own psychoanalysis of this is that she transitioned from her mother being her emotional support to emotional affair guy. For some reason she has always needed a bond outside our marriage, not from me. I think this isn't me. I think this is her demons. I can't fix this, and I can't expect her to fix herself. I feel like I need to be guarded going forward, and that is no way to continue a marriage. She has a pattern of chaos. She needs chaos in her life. What if she puts on a happy face and tricks us all into thinking this is good and what she wants, and 2 years from now we're on to the next problem? I think at this point I agree that I have to give this another shot. But I have rules. If they are broken, if I give it time and she is not open to me emotionally, I'm leaving. Our 3-year-old already sees our problems. It breaks my heart. I've held us together for them. Thinking D is more damaging. This is even worse. I hope it gets better. We're at least trying. She knows about the no contact, but she told me that he understood and apologized to both her and me for his part in it. She agreed to never talk to him again without my permission. I feel like I need to find a way to enforce this. Maybe I will later. I need ideas and help there. I'm an engineer and computer guy. I have the means to tap and track computers, phones easily. I'm not sure if that is the right thing to do though. I called the guy a few minutes ago and offered to grab a beer and chat. We're meeting this afternoon. Summary of conversation. Me, in an effort to get this all out on the table. I've always known you as a stand-up guy and I can see how you were there for my wife in a time of need, and I can appreciate that. I know that she values your relationship and I'd love to buy you a beer to chat so we can discuss the situation and where it has gotten to today. I'll tell you what I told her. I'm sorry for any pain this has caused. My job now is to remove myself from the equation so you two can work out what you need to. I'll certainly meet you wherever you'd like to chat about it. What kinds of questions do I need to bring up? What kind of posture should I take? What kind of information am I trying to get? Guy and I are both non-confrontational people. There is little to no chance of it escalating to a brawl. That is not my intent at all. I feel like I need to hear his side and feel him out for what he thinks my wife is thinking. Is that a healthy thing to know? Am I crazy for trying to confront him in this way? I feel like I need to pretend I see him as a good guy to reinforce his self-image that he's just doing the right thing. To get him to tell me what is really going on. Update, I'm going to call Guy and tell him I need to push that off a few days because it would be too late tonight. He doesn't get off until 5:30 and live 45 minutes away from us. Yesterday DW and I agreed to have a fun evening together. That would certainly sour things by taking time away from her and I, and also the questions in the back of her mind. Wonder what they talked about. Instead, I'm taking her out bowling, something we haven't done since having kids but always used to have a lot of fun with as far back as we can remember, and we're going to try out this counseling thing. Mother-in-law is taking the kids for the night. One problem we've always had in our marriage is an indecisiveness on both of our parts over what do you want to do. Anything is okay, how about you? And no one makes plans. I took the reins tonight and will plan it all. Am I wrong in assuming that tracking her beyond the request that all passwords are open just makes me look weak and jealous? If she's going to continue contact, I'll find out either way. Do I really need to snoop? Here is where my head is today. Emotional affair guy is a pathetic loser, no college degree, DW and I both have one. He can't find a woman the normal way and instead had to go after a married one at the lowest point in her life, while she was living in the hospital with a daughter being cut open multiple times for major surgery. Emotional affair guy has always been infatuated with DW. Since we were both 15, DW and I have known this. DW loves the attention but knows that emotional affair is a loser. She has always had him as a friend on the side because she likes the attention. That is always what it was before. This time it turned more serious. That's a problem. DW feels guilty, ashamed. That is clear to me. Doesn't make it right. I'm not making excuses for her. What she has done is wrong. In the current state of our marriage, the door was open for this. I haven't been there for her. Again, still doesn't make it right. I am not threatened by emotional affair guy. Honestly, if DW is dumb enough to leave me for him, she is downgrading her life. She is too good of a mother to do that to our children. Our children would be worse off. I would be better off. The last 24 hours DW and I have made a lot of progress. On our date last night, we connected like we haven't in years. Small things. In the car I put my hand under the back of her hair to massage her head. I realized I hadn't done this since before our first daughter was born. I wasn't looking at her while doing this, but later in the evening she said that she was crying while I did that, asking if I noticed. She followed up saying that it had brought back a flood of emotions from our good years earlier in our relationship and marriage. I'm in a better place today mentally. DW hugged me today in a way I haven't been hugged in years. I know this is a tough road to recovery, but as the first MC brought up, we had issues way before emotional affair guy got into the picture. I think I could be happier outside of this marriage. In fact, I know I would be the way it's been the last 3 years. However, we have a connection, bond that goes back to our childhood that we've lost along the way. If we get that back and we are happy together, who knows? I may be an idiot for trying, but it is worth another year of pain to try and make this work for my kids. If my wife and I are capable of growing from this counseling to the point where we are happy, something neither of us has been for a while. Maybe, I'm never going to settle for what we've been doing, ever again. This loveless marriage we've been living. I am not perfect. I am an inactive listener. I need to learn to stop that. I'm also an arger, overanalyze, always talking way too much instead of listening. I'm an INTJ. My wife sees me overanalyzing as manipulation in all of our confrontations, I think. What I do know is that I am a much better man than emotional affair guy, a better husband, and I think my wife is smart enough to figure that out along the way. If not, oh well. I can't end this relationship without giving it a shot to work. I'd regret it. Our 1-year-old has a difficult life ahead of her. What she has gone through in the last year makes anything else in life seem petty, including whatever DW and I are dealing with. Right now, focusing on the darkness and whatever had transpired prior to my opus is only going to sabotage any chance of moving past this. My guard is up, but I'm going to do the best I can. MC again on Tuesday that I'm actually looking forward to. Took me a while to track this down. Glad I found it. It's been a long 10 months of self-reflection and I can finally dissect the process and steps involved. I feel more self-aware, and it's improved my relationship not only with my wife, but everyone else in my life. I found out a lot more, and things got significantly worse before they started to get better. December was the low point, a month after writing this. We are still together and both agree that we are happier in the marriage than we've been. Not sure if anyone here is into Myers-Briggs, but it has been an incredible resource for me. My wife is an ESFJ, I am an INTJ. Communication had been our key breakdown. It's been an interesting study to try and understand the part that played from both sides. Expectations not being met, disappointment not being shared, assuming the other was working against you, when really, they were just as equally frustrated. No excuses or free passes. We've both learned a lot and have a lot to learn. Still difficult things to work through, but we're on a path that we both feel is healthiest for our daughters. If or when that ever changes, of course we'll reevaluate. 2 years later, we are divorced. A few weeks after my final post 2 years ago, I stopped pretending everything was okay and started pulling threads. I reached out to a contact I found on my ex-wife's phone when it all started. There was a message from a guy named Josh simply stating can't play this weekend, maybe Monday, which at the time she had convinced me was a creepy guy who wouldn't stop sending her disrespectful messages. At the time I asked her if she didn't mind me taking care of it, so I copied his phone number to mine and texted him to leave her alone. Keep in mind, this isn't the emotional affair guy, it's another one. That week I decided to reach back to the guy and told him that my wife, at the time, and I had been in counseling for months and I was trying to help her cope. I told him what she told me she thought of him and was interested to hear his side of the story. Amazing what kind of information you can get from a guy who was called a creep who wouldn't leave her alone. He didn't divulge everything but said he felt like a therapist to her. That when they met, she wasn't wearing her ring and she didn't tell him she was married. He said she reciprocated in the playful games they were engaged in. I confronted her about this and she played it off again as his fault. I pushed more and she finally spilled the beans. She slept with this guy 2 days after meeting him in 2007, just 2 years into our marriage, while she was on vacation at her mother's beach. They continued to have a texting relationship over Skype and phone from that day forward. He knew nothing about the guy she was in an emotional affair with, John, and he said they talked all the time about how she planned to leave me, probably his own excuse or rationalization for fraternizing with a married woman. She also told me at that point she had still been in contact with John, the emotional affair guy that started this whole thing. She had lied about cutting off all contact with him, and they set up secret emails and bought separate phones to still communicate. At that point she asked me if I'd consider an open marriage. For context, she's, on the surface, an extremely conservative Christian. She said she didn't want anyone to know and encouraged me to find someone else. Ugh. The reason she had stopped seeing our marriage counselor individually is because that came up in her session, and the counselor said it was a conflict for her to advise us on the marriage and advise her on her continued infidelity. Makes sense that a month prior my marriage counselor told me, "I think you finally have everything you need to make a decision here," instead of her usual pep talk about working through everything. For 5 days I swallowed my pride to see what else she would tell me, stating I needed everything if I was even going to consider staying. She openly discussed a third guy she had started seeing while we were engaged, 10 years prior. She admitted to introducing our daughters to 2 of these 3 men and that she had physical affairs with all 3, that none of them knew about the other. She also informed me she had lied to her own counselor about me, convincing each other that I had Asperger syndrome. I am convinced my ex-wife has borderline personality disorder. She never apologized for any of her actions, and over the next few days started to divulge more information about these men, speaking about them as if they had ex her. I stopped her in the middle of one of them. "Why on earth would you take your 2-year-old daughter in 2011 to meet a man who ex you in 2009? And then why on earth would you meet him again after privately so he could do it again?" Yes, she was trying to convince me that this guy, Josh, had ex her twice and that she never actually committed adultery because of it. I found a 4th guy on October 1, 2013 and decided I had enough to realize this had nothing to do with me. I had been beating myself up for months, feeling like a failure, trying to fix things. That afternoon I saw a lawyer, and he said if she was speaking openly about stuff to try and get her on recording, legal in the state of Virginia. I went home that night and asked her to explain everything again one more time. She explained everything in detail for 20 minutes, which at the culmination I stood up, took my ring off and said, "Let's make this as easy for our daughters as possible. I can never trust you again, and I never will." Immediately after the separation I started feeling better about myself. I started to realize just how codependent this relationship was. I started to see my part in that and I started to heal. I realized that nothing good can come from trying to analyze the behavior. I also quickly realized that expecting her to be truthful and play fair after divorce was just silly after everything she did in the marriage. I became strategic, yet fair, with everything, and it served me well as my daughters. I wanted so badly to blast to the world what she had done to me, but I only told my close friends and family. I don't need my daughters growing up knowing these things about their mother. I started protecting myself, mentally and emotionally, focused on my daughters, reconnected with my family and friends, everyone that I had been pushed from my life, in an effort to work on the marriage. I am a better father today for all of this. Broken people do not need to be fixed, they need to be supported so they can fix themselves. My entire marriage was a struggle because I attached to someone who I thought would always appreciate me standing by her, through everything bad that would come her way. I stood by way too long, but I'm glad I got the answers in the end. I walked away from it with clarity, and created a folder and printing out everything, adding it next to a diary I've kept from the time. I'm not sure why I felt the need. Maybe that's still a healing process for me. I've protected my daughters from almost all of this. My 6-year-old is extremely intuitive, and I think she's going to get to the bottom of this as a teen. However, something she said to me last week really struck me. I didn't even know how to respond. We were out driving near the old house and she said, "I miss that house. Mommy says you left us and that's why we had to sell it. Someday when they are older, if they have questions, I still have to resolve how I'm going to deal with that." For the moment I corrected my daughter and told her that wasn't correct. I said that Mommy and Daddy decided to no longer be married because we were unhappy, but that neither one of us left them or the house. I stressed that despite Mommy and Daddy not wanting to be married anymore, that we both still love her and her sister. My goal is to not have my girls be stuck between things. They should never feel they have to choose or hate either of us. I'm interested to hear people's thoughts on how to deal with this. My ex-wife is a pro at playing emotionally manipulative games, and I'm sure my daughters are going to get a lot of passive negativity about me. All stuff she can have deniability. I'm envisioning my ex driving by the house with the girls and sighing, "I love that house, remember how much we loved that house," and waiting for them to ask why we moved and then telling them, "Oh, well, Daddy moved away so we had to." How does one maintain a neutral stance in the best interest of his daughters while not getting walked over with situations like that? I'd really appreciate people's thoughts or ideas. I think I'm gathering this information to have evidence for the future, but I can't imagine reading this thread about my own mother. I don't think that is the answer. I hope that my daughters just grow up trusting me and realizing that I always tell the truth. That they feel safe, and when conflict arises and they get conflicting stories, they'll already have a sense of how emotional mommy is, and that she bends facts to be a victim. Comments: wow, your ex is a truly manipulative, lying traitor. I am very happy for you that you are rid of her. Did you ever expose her many A's to her family, especially her mom, who you have also known since childhood? If not, I would consider doing so for one reason at this point. Your ex-WW seems like she is going to poison your children against you and shift the D and collapse of their family onto you. If her family knows the truth, they may be able to check or minimize her attempts to do this by holding her accountable, especially her mom, since you have known her so long and your ex-WW is close to her. Of course, this assumes that your mother-in-law did not know the whole time about her cheating. You say they were close and at least one of her fun fests happened at her mom's beach house. If necessary, you may have to take steps to prevent ex-WW alienating your daughters sooner rather than later. No need for graphic details. But if you continue to hear blame statements about you from your kids, I think you should simply explain it to them this way. You know that being M means a mom and dad are not supposed to have other boyfriends and girlfriends. Well, mommy decided she wanted to have other boyfriends than dad, so we couldn't stay M anymore. And then explain that it had nothing to do with them, and that you and mom still love them very much. Don't allow her years of poisoning your daughters against you before you try to tell them what really happened. By that time, your ex-WW's lies may have become the lens through which they view everything you say and do. They will disbelieve you and think you are telling disgusting lies about their mom to cover your own guilt. They might end up despising you more. OP responds: as I read my original post, I am reminded of just how I felt at the time I wrote it. I forgot how strongly conflicted I was at the time. The information I obtained about my wife cheating, the logic behind it, was all clear as day, and the advice I received here was very clear and good. You guys saw through the fog I was stuck in at the time. For me, I was still trying to make sense of it in the context of the life I was in at the time. What I've discovered about myself through this, and I think what many in my shoes experience at the time, is a need to accept this reality myself and come to terms with it. This doesn't mean I couldn't be helped along, but I will say I was very much in the mindset of wanting to not believe it was true and grabbed onto anything that would fit that emotional need. Anything that gave me hope it wasn't true. I rejected direct and stern, at the time I viewed as callous, advice that was telling me I was wrong for sticking through it. Anything I viewed as judgmental was blocked. I believe, for myself, the best medicine came from those who told me I understand what you're feeling this way, but you need to consider. Walls go up against things I don't want to hear, the stuff that conflicts with my emotions. I am a very logical person, more so than most, so for me to put a wall up against logic as I sort out emotion is a telling thing. I believe most people on the bad end of these blindsiding moments would have even larger defenses against the cold reality being thrown in their face. So much to say. Looking back, I do not regret spending 11 months on this. This gets a bit more personally into my own situation, and I do think I should have gotten to the bottom of this sooner. More on that later, and how maybe I could have skipped a lot of the pain, but I really needed to know it wasn't my fault. I blamed myself when I found my wife in an emotional affair. I know now she used it against me for months, but although those months were hell, I stepped out of this without anger, but rather an understanding of what really happened and my part in it. I look back and can say I tried my best. See, if I had left my wife on November 8, 2012, I would have never discovered the multiple other affairs. I would have never known emotional affair guy was physical also. I would have always questioned if my daughters ended up on the bad end of this if I acted too harshly and not giving her a second chance. Maybe this is excuses and rosy glasses. I am not a depressed individual. I am an optimist. I try to look at the bright side of everything, and I certainly use that in my darkest moment here. A week after my initial post here, I went to my doctor and had an STD test. How humiliating. The doctor saw me shaking and asked if I was okay sleeping at night. I had told him why I was there. He prescribed me Mezzo Sleep. Ugh. I took the stuff 5 times before I looked up online just how serious it was. It certainly did the job, but I didn't want to live like a zombie. So, I threw it out. Looking back, I know I worked like hell to make this work. I gave my ex-wife the benefit of the doubt at so many turns. 2 months after my initial post I had an intuition something was up. My ex-wife and I had been at a holiday party and she left her coat there. She took our snowboards with her and said she was going to pick up her coat and getting the boards waxed for an upcoming trip. She said she would also go grocery shopping on the way home. Signal. She didn't know, but I picked up on it subconsciously. The grocery store was her excuse for heading to meet John. And she didn't realize that she normally never told me when she was grocery shopping. Instead, she would call me while there and ask if I needed something. It was out of her ordinary to tell me in advance she was going. So, I sat at home, kicking myself for feeling so anxious. I texted her and asked where she was so she was giving me a heads up on her location. I called her an hour later and she answered the phone with a very unusually chipper tone and just sounded guilty. I couldn't put my finger on it, but I asked her to come home immediately, and we talked about things. I told her I was feeling anxiety, and she more or less told me its process, and I needed to get over it. Fast forward to 6 months later when everything came out and she admitted to maintaining contact with emotional affair guy. She told me, almost like a serial killer does who gets caught. So proud of their achievements, that I had her worried so often. She said it was really scary with you, it's like you always knew when I was up to something. Remember that time I was with the snowboards and you called to check on me? She went on to explain how she had met with John that day, and when I called him and her were in the car together, both froze when she heard his phone ring and they were paranoid I was tracking them somehow. Again, this is the level of manipulation and deceit I was dealing with. She told me she was impressed, with the coldest look on her face. We had to be really sneaky with it. I think that made it more enjoyable for her, sadly. I've gone on a tangent here. Okay, back to the questions. I wish I had trusted my own gut. As a codependent, I was quick to suppress my own doubts, and I actually beat myself up over not being a better husband and giving her the space she needed to come back to me. Blah, blah, blah. The stuff you hear. I really wish something had clicked in me on November 8th and I had been tougher on her. Not mean, but strict. I read your messages so much different now. I was weak at the time. I wanted her to come back to me. I wanted her to choose me. I felt like I was in a fight, but on the defense. I should have been offensive. I should never had put up with her remaining friends with emotional affair guy on Facebook until a week before Christmas. This was a constant struggle and topic in our marriage counseling. I actually told myself, she needs to do it on her own. I can't tell her to do it, or else she hasn't learned. So, I dealt with the pain of knowing this guy, who I thought she wasn't communicating with at all, was still seeing our lives on Facebook. She guilted me over it, still calling him just a friend and saying it's difficult, and like a permanent thing to remove someone. Jesus, I sound so stupid now. I actually listened to her guilt me over it, saying I really believe that someday him and I will be friends again, but if I remove him from Facebook it's like he's never going to be my friend again. It's like admitting that isn't possible. I fell for it. How sickened I was later. A year later, when I discovered this anguish I endured over such a simple thing, removing emotional affair guy from Facebook. Or I leave, which is what I should have said. She actually was communicating with him on the side. That means her act of keeping him there wasn't at all what she was projecting. She easily could have told him through their secret accounts the reason. She actually kept him there to put me through that pain. It was power and control. She would use it in the game and counseling. To make her own demands. If I had left my ex-wife in 2012, I would have left her feeling like the weaker option. A man slides in and I didn't do enough to protect my family from him. I always would have had that doubt. November 2012 through March 2013 was the most difficult time of my life, but I worked like hell at it. I was home every day, doing everything I could around the house, setting up family functions and events for us to do, asking her what she needed help with, going into counseling with an open mind and really holding myself accountable to anything that I might do to be better. By April 2013 I had resolved the emotional side of this. I realized we were not in love, and she was not working at the counseling. I become numb to it. I started to protect myself emotionally, but at the time was resigned to the idea she wasn't cheating anymore and at least we were going to produce a happy home for our daughters. June and July, I signed up for a work trip. Ex-wife and I both thought it was a good thing for us. She encouraged me to go. I left with a clear head and I really felt that was the time I started to see things more clearly, logically. When I came home in August, I started really dissecting the details of what didn't add up. I started doing all the things I wish I had done 10 months prior. It only took me a month to get to the bottom of it all. I feel I'm rambling again. This may be helpful. Let me try to more directly state what I wish I had done differently. My comment, Part 2 ending. We will see OP grow as a man and provided a very good update ending. Subscribe right away. And see you in the ending.